Welcome back to the Inspired Life Show. I'm so excited to be here at the Haven Studio, and joining me right now is celebrated Vancouver actor, award-winning filmmaker who just completed an amazing new project, which we can't wait to talk about, and he's celebrating 20 years of the Haven Studio. I'm talking about none other than Ben Immanuel. Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for that nice introduction. Congratulations on your new show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thanks for welcoming us in your
bet.
space. So much going on for you. You're teaching full-time. You wrote, directed this amazing project, Have Hope Yo. I love that name. Tell us about your new feature.
Good. Well, you know, the name, we're trying to figure that out because people seem to either really love it or hate it. I can tell you the name about 10 years ago, maybe more, I was walking up on Main Street with my wife and I saw someone had spray painted that on a wall in like really huge letters. And there was something about that slogan, I'll call it a slogan, that just made us smile and made us happy. And I took a picture of her beside it. And I always remembered it. And then making this latest feature, we started it as a web series and it was called Trigger Me. Because, you know, everybody's trigger is a big word these days. And it seems like it's a popular, not popular, it's a necessary word for, especially young people use it a lot. And the new show or the new film is about a therapist and 3 of her young clients during the pandemic and sort of what they go through and how the pandemic changes them. So we shot it back in October of 2020. And then 3 years later almost, we're finishing it and we get to tell this story of these people going through this time in history and how they come out the other side. Trying to get a new title for it to freshen things up. Have Hope Yo just stayed in my mind because what else can you do during these times, right? You got to have hope. You got to keep going and hope that we're kind of through the worst of that pandemic and we're on to, you know, a bit of a smoother ride. But the title's been interesting because some people really love it and some people think it's really stupid.
I love the title. It actually put a smile on my face, and just even imagining it as a social media hashtag, like Have Hope Yo. And I feel it's got a very fun, but I'm sure with, you know, when it's talking about the pandemic, I'm sure there's some heavier topics in there too. Yeah. So tell me about the inspiration of like writing this and how amazing that, you know, you started writing it and then in 2020, like the same year, you started making it. So tell me about that process.
Well, this is my 3rd feature and I've made one every 10 years. That's how long it takes me to need to make a feature, right? I tend to make a film and I go, okay, this is a story I have to tell. And in between features, I've been working in television, developing and pitching television, which is a whole other animal and a very different world than independent film. Independent film, if you really want to do it, if you have to do it, you can figure out a way to do it. In, you know, national or international television production, it's the will and the passion and the determination isn't enough. Everything has to line up. The moon and the stars have to line up perfectly. So while pitching television and working on writing TV, I've said it's time to make another feature. The pandemic was going on. A friend of mine said you should do something about the pandemic. And I said, I don't know what to do. I don't want to, you know, we just started the thing and it didn't appeal to me. But what happened was I was teaching online acting classes since, you know, right at the beginning, since March. And people were meeting in this, what turned out to be surprisingly intimate little world, you know? You'd think that online isn't a good place for acting class, and there was sort of controversy about that because some people thought, how can you teach acting classes online? But what it ended up being was a place for people to connect and communicate when we really needed to. And it's intimate because people are kind of inviting you into their homes, right? So you see people, you know, they pop up on the screen for class and they're in their little room and they kind of got their little twinkly lights on their wall, or their closet's open, or their bed is unmade, or their cat is, or their dog, you know. It's pretty private and personal and vulnerable, right? So it turned out to be surprisingly affecting for me. I really kind of felt the hearts and souls of people. And it meant a lot to me to be able to still do something where I felt I was of service and I was able to keep my business open. So it was a really important time for me, you know. A few things came up during class in discussions. One of them was social media. I had a student who wanted to be, she told me she wanted to be a TikTok star. And I didn't know anything about TikTok or social media, and I was a little judgy about it, like not to her, but I'm thinking, God, these, you know, young kids, like they're just obsessed with this horrible social media, and like, so I said, I got to investigate this, and I looked her up on TikTok, and it turned out she's really doing funny and videos, and she's really talented. And I said, I want to kind of learn more about this and why this is so popular these days and how it affects people's lives. The other one was a student of mine who's non-binary. And, you know, that's a complicated, sensitive subject. And discussions come up in class sometimes if people want that, right? I can never press that subject. But this person, Elliot Ramsey, the other student I was talking about is Natalie Farrell. Elliot was somebody I could talk to, and he could talk to other people, and he goes by he or they. I'm going to say he for now. Elliot was so articulate and so open and so funny that we could have good conversations about gender, about a lot of things without it feeling dangerous, right? Without it feeling like I was going to say something inappropriate or somebody was. We could have good open conversations, and it was like great to talk to him. And the other person is Favor Onwuka, and she was in class with me the day after George Floyd got killed. And she is the only black person in that class. So she shows up in class with 8 white faces, and there's Favor. And that was obviously very complex. So these are a few of the things that happened during the beginning of COVID for me. And I got really involved in the idea of telling these stories in collaboration with these students of mine. So it's their story, and I, you know, I'm able to sort of be the dramaturge and put it all together, and I end up writing the scripts. But these stories in this film have Hope Yo wouldn't exist without those stories.
I love that. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. And I fit in by, the other character in the film is a therapist, and she's played by Gabrielle Miller, who I love working with. It's not Gabrielle's story. It's more part of me, just as the sort of facilitator. And it's also a therapist I've known for over 20-something years who's helped keep me relatively sane. And it's not her, but it's certainly inspired by having someone in your life who knows you really, really well and who sees the good in you and helps, you know, just kind of guide you toward, I don't know, it's a long journey, isn't it, right? It's a long journey. And when you have someone in your corner who really knows you, it makes for me, it's made for a better journey through all the challenges of life and the changing seasons of life, right? So I wanted to tell that story too. So I had a lot to draw from, and we did hours of improvs and interviews. We made this thing. A big company saw it. We're going to do it as, I'm giving you a long answer, okay?
No, I think I was so happy and excited for you when I saw Westworld. Exec producer's name attached, so congratulations on that.
Well, thank you.
Tell us about that.
Well, I showed it to a friend of mine, Richard J. Lewis, who's been an executive producer and director on Westworld for years. Sometimes I don't talk to him for a number of years, then we connect again. I sent a little clip of this, just not wanting to do business, just going, check this out, this thing I'm working on. He said, I love it, let me bring it to Thunderbird. We brought it to Thunderbird Productions. They loved it, they're a huge company. We pitched it for a while. Nobody wanted to do anything on the pandemic out there in TV. Everybody we pitched it to said, we love these characters, this is really well done. How do we do something on the pandemic? People in TV have touched it. You know, they've sort of like said, you know, oh, there's somebody with a mask. Or
it's
whatever.
too close. It's close, it seems. But I think
It's
like
not too, yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But at the same time, to talk about it perhaps now, because we did all go through this and the pain and the ups and downs. And I'm so glad that you're talking about a therapist, because I feel what's also come out of the last few years is talking about like even for me personally, like as an immigrant from Pakistan, for a long time, I just felt that, okay, I just needed to like fit in as soon as possible. I've never openly talked about mental health, like just so many conversations that we're having now. So the fact that you wrote this feature with these beautiful characters that are based on real humans, like I think that is so important. And in a time of COVID, I can't wait to see it.
Well, thank you. I'm with you. That's how I feel about it. That's how I get motivated to do things. Doing a little independent feature, you have to convince a bunch of people, but you don't have to convince everyone, you know? Like TV is just, again, it's a different animal. So when I really want to do something, I just do it. So I got together the people who were on board and we said, let's finish this thing up as a feature. We have guidance from great people. Some big companies have jumped on board to sort of be partners so we can pay for the thing, you know, because it is still really expensive. And we're doing it. So for me, I've been, you know, making movies and been an actor for so long that I'm at the point where I just want to do things that I really believe in. And through doing that, it made me realize I've returned to what I was doing in elementary school, which has always been kind of my authentic self. You know, you stick around this business for long enough, you have to go through different sort of identities and ideas about what you want to do, but hopefully you come out the other side with a great knowledge of who you authentically are and what you have to offer and what you need. And I realized when I was in grade like 6 or something, they brought a big video camera into the classroom, and I'm talking like, you know, the size of like, you know,
The big ones.
It's like really big, heavy thing. Almost
Not
hard.
like our setup today.
No, it's like a, you know, the size of like a mini fridge practically, and it's not even easy for a little kid to pick up. But I remember they brought a camera, and I remember filming kids in the class and filming them discreetly, you know, like just watching their behavior in class, you know. Not following them into the bathroom or anything weird. I'm not talking about being discreet like that. I mean, just like fascinated with their behavior and what they were doing, and that's what I still like doing. I just like seeing the greatness and the heroic nature of normal people and telling their stories, you know? And that's just what I want to keep doing. So that's what we're doing with this film. We're telling stories about ordinary people in a very extraordinary time. And hopefully everybody can relate to it. And hopefully we can help have discussions about difficult things. Because, you know, everything is so, you know, cancel culture and political correctness, sometimes people are afraid to talk. And if we're not talking, then we kind of just get stuck, right? We can't move forward. So this film is the way to have that discussion for me in a safe way, where the characters are speaking for themselves, right? So that's what we're doing.
That's fantastic. I have a question. Can I find you on TikTok now?
Not me, but I had it on my phone for a while after Natalie brought me into that vortex, and I had to take it off because it's too entertaining to, like, it's just, you know, like anything goes on TikTok, right? And it really is easy to get addicted, isn't it? To just
Hours. I feel like sometimes it can be just me and the phone. I couldn't understand it in the beginning because it was during COVID that it really just took off, and everyone was doing these dance moves and such, or people super opening up, which is kind of bringing that reality element in, sort of related to your project, even what you're saying, and inviting you into their home or
their families.
Yes, or even talking so much about mental health, which it's almost like a video diary, but you know, it's like online now. You can find anything online. I found that aspect. First, I downloaded it during COVID, then I deleted it, but now I have it again. And I think because the algorithm is really smart, it can see what kind of content you like to see, and it shows you that. So mine is baking, workouts, mental health, astrology.
And you know, it's all, what can you say? It's like everybody's entitled to spend their time how they want to,
Completely.
right? I know for me, it was too addictive, but what I was liking about it is just looking at these normal people who become stars just going like, you know, here's me and my dad sitting on the couch eating a bag of chips. And the dad is just a funny character, and they're just having a conversation, and it's cinema. You know, it's like storytelling. They're just these little stories. So I got really hooked on kind of following these people's lives and watching what they were doing. And I was just spending, you know, too much time and looking at it before bed and going to bed and having TikTok dreams where things cut in the middle, you know, that weird TikTok cutting.
Yes,
How
yeah.
things, people got, and then they cut. So I got to get rid of this. So I don't look at it anymore, but I don't judge it the same way.
Yeah,
you know?
probably healthy to not look at it anymore.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, I love the fact that you talked about yourself in grade 6. I like to backtrack always. I remember the first time I was on stage, I was in Pakistan. In Pakistan, you cannot really pursue a career in the arts. It is, you know, unless you are coming from an affluent family. So I never really imagined that as a career, but I remember I was in kindergarten and we had this, you know, play, and I was, what do you call it when I'm not the main person, but I'm just
supporting or
No,
background or
not supporting.
ensemble?
The main person got sick, but
Oh, understudy.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you. And I had all their lines memorized, and then on the day, I remember the feeling I got when it was just me getting on stage. It was this fire, it was this like bubbling, and not in a nervous way. It was like, I belong.
Yeah.
And every time I go on, people ask me, do you get nervous? All the time. I'm always nervous. But there's something that happens when you're here. I want to know about that for you. So you're talking about filmmaking. What came first, acting or filmmaking?
Well, a lot of things kind of came together and split apart and came back together. I try to, a quick encapsulation would be always liked telling stories. So sharing stories. So starting as a little kid doing it with drawing and drawing pictures and getting, my dad used to play this game with me as a little kid called Faces, where he'd just say like scared, happy, you know, excited, and I just make these faces, and it just made me really happy to make my parents happy, right? I mean, you know, actors' origin stories are generally, if we go deep enough, they're about connecting, right? And they're about feeling seen or helping other people through their sorrow or what, you know, there's deep reasons for most of us other than just because it's fun to perform. There's more important reasons than that, right? So it started with just, you know, playing around in the house with pictures and puppets and drawing, and then with other kids, but I knew I wanted to do something special. I felt a calling to stand out, and being, you know, the shortest kid in class, you have to kind of make your presence known, you know? It was Muhammad Ali for me as a kid, who I just loved who he was and what he represented, and I started boxing when I was like 11 because I wanted to do something special. No one boxed in Vancouver. So I started boxing, and I took that all the way to the Canadian Junior Nationals by the time I was like 17 or something. But then I took that as far as I could and got, you know, kind of hurt in the head and said, got to stop now. And so luckily I met this kid named Shale Wrench in high school. So you know how it is. It's like fate. You were introduced to people and then your life changes. Shale was a musician. He was a guitar player and a singer, and we became friends, and I ended up being his bass player. And so then I played music and wrote songs with Shale, and we had some pretty fast success playing music. We ended up playing in the Pacific Coliseum opening for Bryan Adams. It was like our 5th gig or something. We were in front of, you know, 16,000 people. So it was kind of a quick little rise. Actually, before that, we had a band in high school, a reggae band called the Two Bads. And when we were...
Called the what?
The Two Bads.
Okay,
There's a song called Johnny Too Bad. So
Okay.
we named ourselves after that song. But we were a bunch of white kids playing reggae, and it was kind of novel, and they ended up putting us in the Commodore opening for bands when we were like 15, 16. So I had some luck, and by meeting the right person at the right time and by being very ambitious, you know, and by not knowing any better. Now, you know, with so much knowledge of the industry, it's harder to believe. But then it's like, yeah, why not us, right? So played music for a while, took that kind of as far as I could, because I knew in my heart I wasn't an instrumentalist. I was more of a verbal communicator, and I felt a lot better when I quit playing music and started studying acting. And
what was that moment for you that you knew? Because it sounds like definitely having the spotlight and being on the stage seems to be a thing, especially as a musician. You have to be, you know, when you're up there performing, the lights are on you. But where did the switch came that you're like, okay, I'm going to study acting. This is a path I want to explore?
Well, I was always shy on stage. I was the shy one, right? The shy bass player. And I'm kind of one of those people, maybe you are too, where part of you is shy and part of you just really needs to be seen and felt, right? But I didn't quite feel, I knew I wasn't doing the right thing. My grandfather was a music teacher, a piano teacher, and he tried giving me lessons when I was a kid. And although I know I'm a musical person, and music's still a big part of my life and using music in films, but you know, musicians, there's something, I don't want to say God-given, but maybe it is. There's something, you know, in your hands, and there's tone in your fingers. And I don't feel like I had that. I practiced a lot, and I never quite felt like I could speak through my instrument, you know? And other people I was playing with, or people I knew, I could see them progressing so much faster. So I was helpful in the band. I wrote lyrics, and I sort of managed the band and kind of kept it going. But I said, yeah, this isn't really, I can't speak through my fingers on this bass, you know? It's not a part of me. It didn't feel like a part of my body, and it should. So I started kind of thinking I'm going to have to find something else to do. But it was terrifying to let go of that identity of being in the band. And everybody goes, you're in the band, and we were in the paper, and we won. You know what I mean? We got attention.
You're opening for Bryan Adams.
It was exciting, right?
Yeah.
So it was scary to go, I got to start over. But it just got to the point where, fortunately, circumstances in the band got tough, as they do in bands, especially when you're 19, 20 years old. And things got screwy enough in the band where I said, okay, I'm going to step away now. And somebody I was working for part-time, Sam Feldman, who was a big music
Yes,
manager.
I'm familiar,
Sam said, you know, I think maybe you could be an actor. He said, maybe you could do that. Maybe you can write movies. And there are things I've been thinking about, but I hadn't taken the plunge, because back then it wasn't so popular around here, right? So I started doing stand-up comedy, and then started taking acting classes, and that was like the late 80s, early 90s. And yeah, I haven't stopped hustling since I was like 15 with that first band. I'm kind of tired. I'm going to tell you, kind of tired. It's like been like putting up flyers and hustling, and just, you know, that's just been a lifestyle for many, many years. And it's what it takes to be an artist. Unless you win the lottery and just get picked, most of us have to really hustle. And like, you know how it is yourself getting your new show started, right? You just have to make things happen yourself.
That's very well said. And it's interesting. I relate so much. I relate so much. And thank you so much for sharing so deeply. During COVID, I thought I wanted to have, you know, be an adult. And I'm grateful for the opportunities I got. I got like a day job, and I thought, okay, you know, I just celebrated a milestone birthday that I'm going to, you know, do this thing. But a couple of months after turning 40, there was just this thing after a long weekend that I just could not do it anymore. And I know in my heart of hearts that I understand why people get sick. That when you're not following your heart's calling, even if it doesn't sound like intellectually like it may be the right thing, but what it takes to be an artist, and a lot of it is trusting and falling forward and just trusting that things are going to align. And you know, I want to talk about what made you decide to write your own projects. Like, I was listening to one of your interviews yesterday. It was done in 2009, I think. I forget, it was with first weekend club for Downriver.
Yeah, 2013.
And 13,
yeah.
okay. And creating your own projects, you know? So for example, an actor out there, or even like a filmmaker or someone who's feeling stuck, I would love for them to hear your story and get inspired, because you haven't just sat down and waited for things to come to you. You have gone out there and made them happen.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's different for everybody, but a commonality for some, like me, is it has really deep roots and really deep emotional roots. Some people love the magic of cinema. They love movies and they love fantasy and escapism, and that's great, right? They just want to, it's a make-believe magical world. That's not the case for me. For me, it's holding a mirror up to nature. And it's like I want to be able to express and communicate my specific point of view on the world. And somehow that makes me feel better. That's part of what we talk about in the film Have Hope, Yo. I want to, well, there's a famous author who was a Holocaust survivor named Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
He said, suffering ceases to be suffering when we find meaning. So if we find meaning in the things we go through, it just feels better. So no matter what happens, it feels better when you can communicate things, right? So my first feature, actually before my first feature, my first thing was a one-man show. I was doing stand-up, but stand-up was fun and certainly a great learning ground to communicate and to be a performer, but you know, maybe half the people are drunk. And they're there to drink and party, you know, and to have fun. And they're not necessarily there to listen to stories. You have to really grab them and you have to win them over, right? And then you can. And that's what the great stand-ups do, right? They kind of overcome the chaos and they get people focused. But I wanted to do theater where people were there to sit and listen. So I wrote a one-man show. It was called Cherished and Forgotten. And it was all about, it was just a 30-minute show. I entered it in the Fringe Festival. And I just wrote a story about my life from kind of when I was a little kid up until the age of, I guess I was 25 then or something. And I communicated about the things I wanted to communicate. And it was, I think it was funny, and it was, had emotional depth to it. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the light and the dark, on the sunny side of the street, and not the dark side of the street just to make people feel bad, but to do what we do with art, or to at least attempt to, which is to say, it's okay, you know, I feel like that too, or I've been through that too, and to kind of, you know, give people an opportunity to see themselves in someone else's story, all that stuff, you know? So I got started at that pretty young, and it felt good, it felt right for me. So the natural progression of that was to eventually make films, and I made my first one in 2003 when I had a pretty strong acting career going. You know, I was doing, see, I think, you know, when they say the stomach is connected to your emotions, and when I start talking about things, I hear my thing go, and I think that's just, maybe it's just feelings, maybe it's coffee, I don't know. Anyway, we can't edit out the rumbling stomach.
It's great. Those are the feelings, though. We're digging deep today.
But yeah, I made a film called Moving Malcolm, which really was about my family. There was a plot line that was extraneous to my family, but it was me trying to make my family feel good. It was me trying to make my parents feel good. It was me trying to show my parents that it was okay that, you know, they adopted this kid who had autism, and it was kind of heartbreaking they didn't know she had autism. And when she was about 2, they discovered that, and that was hard. And my parents, like a lot of families, are complex and kind of, you know, not always easy. So I tried to make a film that was kind of funny and humorous and just showed the love of a family and how we always return to the family. Or we don't always, but sometimes we do. And that's what motivated me more than anything. Yeah, I wanted to be a filmmaker, but I just really, you know, they're very personal, emotional motivations. And that kept me going at that age. And then my next film was for my friend, the late great Babs Chula, who was a mentor and a dear friend to me and so many people. And when she passed away, I was just really inspired to make a film about that sort of mentor figure, you know, somebody who is your guide through life, without you even knowing sometimes, you know. And that film was about, one of the characters was a painter, and one of the characters was a musician, and one of the characters was an actor. So I was able to tell the stories about all the things I kind of know a bit about through these characters, but they're all women. And I wrote the parts for actors I know specifically. That's what I like to do. No auditions, just if you want to do this together, we're going to do this. So I've been able to really communicate the things I want to, and at the best of times they land with other people. And I guess that film was about, for me, facing death, you know, like for real. Because when your friend dies, you kind of got to go, wow, this is a real thing. It's not, everything's not in this imaginary future. It's, we live with it, right? And then this third film, like we talked about, was just for me about embracing and learning from a younger generation and finding a way with them and through them to overcome some of our struggles during the pandemic by sharing our stories, you know? So the short answer is, how I got into making films is by having things I needed to communicate in order to feel any kind of sense of stability.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I super, super love that. We're sitting here at your acting studio at Haven. I have not been in class with Ben, so I've heard amazing things about you as a teacher. I had no idea you've been teaching for so many years. Even before you founded Haven, how long exactly?
I started in 1995. I had a great teacher. A lot of people in the acting business will know Ivana Chubbuck.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah, and she asked me to teach for her. And she was here in Vancouver. I studied with her in Vancouver and also while I lived in Los Angeles. But I started with her in Vancouver. She'd come every couple of weeks and do a workshop. And she invited me out for drinks one night. And I was thinking, why is she inviting me out for drinks? Like, what's going on here? Does she have a part? Does she know a director? Is something weird going on? And she said, I think you should teach at my studio. She said, I think you have teacher brain and you can do it. And I fully embraced it. I was pretty nervous at first, right? Because at that point I had only been acting professionally for about 5 years. And I thought, I don't think I don't know if I have the experience to do this, but you got to start somewhere. And starting with her was great. I knew I liked teachers, you know. Another part of kind of my story for sure is having great teachers when I was a kid. Mrs. Hooper in grade 1 and 2 and Mr. Robbins in grade 5, who connected with us really authentically, and that felt safe and that felt right for me. So there was part of me that kind of knew I wanted to be a teacher. I remember in grade 8 in high school, they made us fill something out or write something about what do you want to do in the future. And you know, then I was boxing and I thought, like, I'm going to be a boxer, but part of me knew, like, I was a kid from Kitsilano, middle class kid. You don't really get to be a boxer that way, you know? It's a rough game. And if you come from a comfortable life, chances are you're not going to be a boxer, right? I found that out the hard way by fighting guys who wanted to be a boxer more than I did, you know, or needed to. But I remember filling this thing out in grade 8 and thinking, teacher, you know, maybe I'll be a teacher. But I wasn't that great at school because I was really creatively minded, and I didn't, you know, I never really learned how to do that kind of work. Like, I just was always kind of off in my own thing creatively. So maybe not the best background for a teacher, but sure enough, it came around in a different way later, right?
But so much experience, you know, from performing to boxing, like life experience.
Yeah, and wanting to connect authentically, you know, like there's so many great teachers out there, and I've got to study with a lot of them, but particularly there's a guy named Mel Tuck who's still with us in Vancouver, pretty old now, but still teaching a bit, I think. Mel was one of my first really influential teachers here in Vancouver, and then it was Ivana, Larry Moss, another great teacher, learned so much from, and most recently Patsy Rodenberg, who I went and studied with in New York, who's brilliant, author of a bunch of books, one of them, The Second Circle, life-changing stuff for me. So I've been able to learn from them and kind of carve out my own identity with a great foundation of knowledge, right?
I would love to hear, I mean, selfishly, because I'm acting as well, I would love to hear like about, I almost said the Ben Ratner, but Ben Immanuel method, like what, and we'll get to the name change as well. I would love to hear, I mean, of course I would love to come drop in the class, but I would like to hear like your process of teaching, you know, and the fact that you've been doing it for this long. Of course, I'm familiar with your name even before I interviewed you, like I've interviewed you on red carpets before. But you know, you are definitely one of those celebrated names in the Vancouver community as an actor, as a filmmaker, and as a teacher. So for our viewers, and especially anyone who's curious about wanting to act or getting into acting, want to hear like, you know?
Sure, well, I think the main thing about what we do at the studio here, and we have other great teachers, we have Jill Morrison and Nelson Wong teach here ongoing, and we have David Milchard who teaches some improv, and then we have guest instructors. So everyone brings themselves to it as the teachers, right? We have our common ideology is certainly leading with kindness and openness and generosity, but still challenging people. And I can say pushing people, but in a safe way, right? There's the author, John Patrick Shanley, says, theater is a safe place to do unsafe things that need to be done. And that's, you know, there's a lot under that umbrella, isn't there, about what's unsafe and what needs to be done. And in society, we change our perspective of what's safe and what's unsafe and what needs to be done, you know? So that's a constantly evolving conversation about what is the right way to conduct oneself in an acting class. Because when I started, the things that happen in class, there's no way that stuff would fly these days. You know, things were emotionally chaotic and kind of dangerous, and there used to be a lot of abusive teachers, you know?
I can't think of her name. I wonder if it was Michelle. She was also part of the Ivana Chubbuck school here, or was it Fiona?
Fiona,
yes,
definitely was.
Fiona Hogan.
Yeah.
So I studied with Fiona
She's
like
great.
back in the day, and you know, we used to she would get me to do some very specific exercises, and from when I would start to where it would go and the places. And to me, I accidentally fell into acting, and then the rewards that I got out of just training, it was therapeutic.
For sure.
It was so good for my mental health.
Therapeutic is the word. It's not therapy, but
no,
it can be
therapeutic, yeah.
And, you know, as you ask me what we do, so I'm kind of telling you more of like what we don't do, which is enforce anything on anyone and tell them this is it, this is the way. If you don't do what we say, you're failing. That's not what we're about. We have a lot of tools and a lot of experience. All the teachers here have been doing this for a long time. And we bring people in and we find out what works for them. And we hope to have a long-term, ongoing creative relationship so they can develop and grow. And it does take time, you know, it's not, I mean, I think if you really want to be realistic about being a professional actor, especially these days where it's so more competitive than it's ever been in the 30 years I've been doing it. You got to think kind of like, if you really want to do it, it's like saying, do you want to be an athlete, a professional athlete, and what's that life? What do you have to commit to? What do you have to sacrifice? How much do you have to train? Some people can kind of walk through the raindrops and get a lucky break and have a bit of a career, but they live in fear. You know, most of them, can't speak for everyone. A lot of actors who get a lucky break without training, they're always afraid they're going to get exposed and somebody's going to find out they don't know what they're doing. And it's not artistic empowerment that way. It's more about just kind of like, I hope nobody catches on that I don't know what I'm doing. And then if they stick in it long enough, they learn what they're doing on set, if they're lucky enough to keep working. The actors I know, and I've been lucky, I think I'd say most of the actors in Vancouver who have careers good careers have gone through here at one time or another. And some of them have been coming for 20 years, and they keep coming back because they want to fortify what they do, right?
I want to add my name
Yeah.
to that list.
Well, come on in.
Yes.
But what they have in common, the actors I know who last in this business, there's three main things. One of them is that they are invested in the material, right? It's hard to sustain a difficult creative life when you're doing material that isn't really worthy of your investment. It's fun, you can make money, but you can't become a great actor unless you're doing great material. So we do these great plays, written by the great playwrights who have for years, and new playwrights who the whole point of it isn't to sell commercials, right? The point of it is to tell these stories, right? That's the number one thing with plays. Of course, everything is monetized and commercialized, but we start with plays. Great plays make great actors, yeah? So they need to have an investment in the material to keep doing it. You're not going to stay motivated doing Hallmark MOWs. You can have fun and you can make so many people happy and make money, but the chances of most actors staying creatively invested in that through all the ups and downs, probably not too many, maybe some. But when you have beautiful, compelling material, it just keeps pulling you back, right? So that's number one. The next thing is you have to love the creative process. You have to love doing the work. It's like, like an athlete, sure, it's a grind, but you have to love playing basketball if you're going to be a basketball player. At some point, you're not going to want to do it. You're going to be tired. You have to push yourself through, but underneath all that is a love for the game, right? So you have to love doing it. You can't just, there's the old cliche, you can't love yourself in the art. You have to love the art in yourself, right? So if you love the material, if you're invested in the process, and you have a community of people to support you, that you can return to, a home base, a place like this, people do it. Like I say, I have students who have been coming here for over 20 years now.
Wow.
And they keep showing up. When they're working, they keep showing up. When they're not working, they show up. Sometimes I don't see them for years, and they come back and they go, I need some inspiration, right? Bring it on. So I think that keeps people going, right?
Speaking of inspiration, I could just talk to you for we could keep you here all day. I'm just loving this interview, this chat. It's not even an interview, it's a conversation. You changed your name from Ben Ratner to Ben Immanuel. Tell us about that.
Well, I was, 2017 was the big Me Too time, and there's a director, an American director named Brett Ratner, and my name is Ben Ratner. Sounds kind of similar. I wouldn't say we look the same, but we could be in the same family or something, right? So around that time, I remember talking to my acting agent and going, do I have to, is this a problem, right? Because cancellation, right? And I have worked my whole life to have this great reputation, right? About, treating people with respect and kindness here in the studio and everywhere I work, right? And then I can't have people mixing me up with this guy, right? It's just no good. But then we think, okay, well, just leave it. And then in 2021, that name kept coming up when I was doing interviews or whatever, were looking at me on the internet, this Brett Ratner comes up, second page, right? And on a personal level, there's some multi-generational stuff in my family on the Ratner side of just some difficult men, some difficult Ratners, and I'm at a point in my life where I don't want to carry anyone else's baggage. That's it. I want to represent myself and who I am and what I do and how I live my life, and I don't want to have to lead with any noise. If I'm doing business with an American, everyone in Vancouver and across Canada, there's lots of people who know me in this business through what I've done, but newer generations don't. You know what I mean? People in their 20s who are just getting started, And certainly people, when I'm doing business in the States, they don't. I can't go into an office and say Ben Ratner, and they go, Brett Ratner, ugh,
Yeah.
and they get a bad feeling. I've worked too hard to make a bad first impression based on something that has nothing to do with me, right? So it was a tough decision because I kind of felt like, are people going to think I've lost my mind and I'm having some midlife crisis and I've made up this romantic name? But Immanuel is my middle name. So I was born with that name. And people change a lot of things these days, don't they? People make
It sounds like a beautiful name. I love it.
Thank you. But people make bigger changes than their name, and it's accepted. So people who I trust and love were saying, yeah, man, just do it. Don't worry about it. Just do it. So with their encouragement, I said, okay. I haven't changed it legally yet, but for the business, it feels all right. You know, it feels good for a fresh start. And nobody really cares, huh?
Yeah, no.
You know?
And it's interesting because even though I was connecting to your PR agent to get set up this interview, even though in the email it says Ben Immanuel, when I'm doing the paperwork in my brain, because I've interviewed you a few times before, it's always Ben Ratner. It just comes off the top of my tongue. Anyways, moving on, we wanted to address that.
For sure.
I wanted to talk about maybe a big topic, maybe a little one. What inspires Ben today? What inspires you in your life?
I think the main thing is other people. You know, I just love people. I just love the humanity, the bravery, the toughness, the humor of just other people. And when people come into class, like I say, that's where I got inspired to tell my whole story for Have Hope Yo, was just from other people's stories, right? Connecting to them. So on an external place, it's other people, and it can be just, you know, watching somebody, watching a stranger. I remember not that long ago sitting in a restaurant with my wife, and there was this old lady who looked a little bit maybe, you know, maybe a little bit not quite mentally sound, and she had like way too much makeup on and kind of looked clownish. And she was sitting eating her breakfast, and the server came over and said something to her, and this woman had this reaction. And what had happened is the server had come over and said, that nice couple who just left just bought you your breakfast. And the woman was going, why? And they said, I guess they just thought you looked like a nice lady. And so this couple had paid for her breakfast and slipped out, and this woman was so happy and she felt so special, and she was just eating her toast like it was the most special, delicious toast she'd ever had, right? And when I get to see things like that, I get really inspired. When I get to see genuine human connections on a little micro level like that, I love it, you know? Those are the kind of stories I want to tell and the kind of things I want to do. So that's on that level of just watching people around me and being inspired. Great literature, you know, can be really inspiring when we're so fragmented with little other diversions. I get inspired by the journey to try to be a better person, as cheesy as that sounds. I've been married for 12 years, and I want to keep it that way. And I want to keep growing, and I want to keep not going into reactivity when I'm mad, a family tradition, you know, and I want to feel better, feel calmer, Vancouver inspires us, right? To be able to live here and live close to the ocean and just kind of feel that connection to nature, you know? So I guess like my journey is to try to find contentment and peace and acceptance with not only career but life. And that's an ongoing thing, but it's taken a long time. I feel like I'm a late bloomer, you know, but I feel like I'm getting there, and that's more important than a career, you know? Doing interviews like this, when you're younger, you talk about what you're doing. I did this, I did that, I did that. When you get older, you talk about who you are, you know, what your life is, as opposed to more what your career is. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know.
It completely
it's an
does.
ongoing thing, right?
Of course. No, it's beautiful. And even though you touched on it a little bit, because the show is the Inspired Life Vancouver, is there a particular spot in Vancouver that you go to get inspired? Vancouver, surrounding areas, BC?
For sure. Seawall.
seawall, yes.
Yeah, we live just about a block away from English Bay, and you know, I've lived in Vancouver most of my life, lived in Los Angeles for a few years, originally from eastern United States, New Haven, but there's nowhere I feel as at home as that seawall. It's just a spectacular, remarkable, incredible place to be, and I'll never take it for granted. Yeah.
I completely agree. I love walking the seawall with my dog. Ben, thank you so much.
My
This
pleasure.
was so lovely. I honestly think we could have you here for a couple of hours and I could dig deeper, get in there. But this was such a pleasure, and I can't wait to be in here to learn from you. I love the name Haven Acting Studio. That's beautiful. And congratulations on your new film. And thank you so much for inspiring us and our audience today.
Thank you for having me, and same to you, continuing to inspire people with your show, which is, I guess, your way of connecting with your community right now, yeah?
Completely. Thank
Great.
you.
All right, my pleasure.